The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri. On this edition we are most pleased to welcome to the show someone who's been here before, Ben Schneider II from the Oshkosh School Board, but someone from the school board who's making his first visit here. You are no longer a virgin to this show. Dan Becker, who is in, you're in your second year of your first three-year term, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
It's
Pleasure
a
to be
pleasure
here.
to have you, and I love the Rush Limbaugh tie. So,
Just for you, Cheryl.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Want to talk first of all. I mean, we're taping this the day after a rather late school board meeting for you guys. I think it went until after 11, probably close to 11:30 last night. And probably one of the most contentious points of the evening, and I think that's an understatement, was the scheduling. A petition of about 600 parents who had signed it came forward, and basically just, it was poo-pooed by the school board. You two were the only two out of 7 school board members who voted to not change the calendar, i.e. the schedule. And your 5 contemporaries just had contempt, I think, for the constituents, the parents, the taxpayers. Talk to us about what went on.
Well, I think, Cheryl, you made an accurate representation. I think the other 5 board members had a blatant disregard for those that elected them. Our job as board members, Mr. Schneider can refute this if I'm misspeaking, but we're there to represent the public. The public clearly came forward and made their wishes known, and the other five board members had no regard for what they had to say. It's very obvious to me that they turned a deaf ear to those people, and I think that's shameful. It's really shameful.
Ben, is that your feeling as well?
Just to clarify, what the resolution simply requested was the board consider a modified calendar, and consider is the operative word. We just simply wanted to go back to the negotiating table with our union, direct our bargaining teams to go back, listen, factor in all the constituency concerns, the 600-person petition, and see if we can work on this, because we realize that we're in negotiations. We have to renegotiate this calendar, and we simply wanted to try to right a wrong or improve upon something that perhaps was done in not the best manner. And just to clarify, we didn't get parental input to the extent, we really didn't get a lot of parental input, or virtually no parental input before we developed this calendar, because the night we voted on it, it was already approved by the union, and the night we voted on it was a public forum. So we had an virtually adopted calendar by the time we voted on it. So
okay. I watched the meeting last night, and I saw Mrs. Weinsheim say that when they did have meetings to talk about the calendar, she said only 6 to 10 parents showed up. So there were opportunities for parents to comment on the calendar, were there not?
She was speaking of not this year's calendar, Tony, but years prior. Okay, we've held public forums on the calendar. By my recollection, there were in fact 6 to 10 people at last year's gathering for that purpose.
So there never
No, I'm not sure it's safe to assume just because that was the case last year, that would be the case this year.
Okay, so we're talking about a calendar that allows for 17 Wednesdays that have early release, is that correct? So you're both saying that parents really never had an opportunity to comment on that calendar?
Correct.
Okay, but I did read in the paper that the current calendar, the 2005 calendar, elementary and middle school students dismissed early on 9 Fridays, and high school students started late on 18 Mondays. So parents didn't have a problem with that?
Well, they did. But the fact is, after, it's kind of like crying over spilt milk. And after we live the calendar, it is what it is, and parents move on, they adapt.
Yeah.
And then they got adjusted to what I feel is a very difficult calendar to accommodate. But, you know, back to the, you know, only 6 to 10 parents commented. Not everybody comes to the school board meetings or calls us on the telephone. I have a lot of people that stop me at the stores. And the fact is, you know, you look at voter turnout, it is what it is. And you need to extract that information from your constituency and make some perhaps generalizations about, you know, what the majority of the people feel.
But isn't it extraordinary to ask a union and an administration to go back into bargaining to reconsider? Isn't that extraordinary? No. Does that happen frequently?
I don't know.
Where a deal, I assume you agree they bargained in good faith, right? They did bargain, well, the union and the administration.
First of all, it's the union and the Board of Education.
Union and the board.
And as a member of the Board of Education, I bargain based on my feedback from the community.
Right.
If the feedback from the community says, hey, let's redo this, I'm going to take that seriously, as Mr. Becker says.
Who were the board members that were involved in the negotiations?
No, that would be Mr. McDermott and Mr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, so it would be McDermott and Kavanaugh that were the ones that essentially were in on the bargaining that said the 18 or 17 Wednesdays?
17.
All right. So what is their argument as to why we shouldn't look at it again? McDermott and Kavanaugh were in there, right?
Correct.
So they must be claiming that this is a good deal that was reached, and you say no.
I say no. I say that the parents are being unduly burdened by this calendar. We've heard arguments from a number of parents that they need to take vacation days to watch their children. Mm-hmm. They don't want to bear the extra expense of putting their kids in after-school care on such a sporadic schedule. A Wednesday here, a Wednesday there, when they can't find other alternatives. Tony, it's a tax increase. Let's be honest with each other.
How's it a tax increase?
Well, they're getting less service because their children are receiving less instructional time. So one could argue that they're getting less for their money. One could also argue it's a fee because they're going to have to dish out anywhere between $30 and $40 to cover those 17 Wednesdays, as was reported last night.
And yet, again, just going from what I'm reading in the paper, I read that the district sent out over 6,000 letters asking parents what kind of accommodations they would need. And isn't it true that only about, well, a very small amount of people responded, about 100 students? I mean, doesn't that suggest that there really isn't as much of a burden as you guys are saying? I mean, why didn't more people respond to that district letter?
Actually, that district letter was written in a format which was, from what a lot of people communicated to me, it was somewhat misleading. They said, don't call us if you don't have a problem. But the fact is, last year the school board raised taxes 9.01%, and after people saw their tax bill, I would wager that probably 85% of the community were probably outraged by that. But you can't draw a major conclusion because we only had a couple people spoke against the tax increase that therefore it was a good idea. People don't get the information. Not everybody gets the newspaper. Mm-hmm. Not everybody listens to the radio. And if they don't catch the word of mouth.
But hasn't Mr. Heilman, I even heard him say this at the meeting, the district will do whatever it can to accommodate parents who are going to be burdened by these early release dates. I mean, shouldn't the time for a petition be if the district does not accommodate that? In other words, if the district were to say, look, we're going to have 17 early release days and you handle it, we're not going to help you, however. But the district's not saying that, right? No, the district is saying we're going to use the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, isn't that?
I think you're missing the point, though.
Yeah.
It's not, the after school is a fraction of the problem. Let's talk about the erosion of instructional minutes as a result of the school calendar. We're minutes above DPI required minimum. If we have a snow day, we make it up after graduation. Is there a correlation that we're at the bottom of the Fox Valley Association in many measures of test scores, and we're at the bottom for performance? Is there a correlation? I'm not an educator, but I draw some similarities. I look at Kimberly. Kimberly's at the top. Kimberly has more minutes than we do. So, you know, we can debate that all we want, but the after-school care is only a fraction of the problem. Mm-hmm. Mr. Becker said the lost instructional time, the tax increase, it's the feeling that the parents, the people that pay the bills, the reason why the reason why we have a school district is the students and the parents of all their students that go there. They're the ones that constantly have to always seem to accommodate the system, program cuts, user fees, etc. And at some point, we have to say enough's enough. And I think that's what we've seen. That's what we're seeing the beginning of. And I think we're going to see it because there's a lot of people that seem to be wanting to run for school board. And I hope that happens.
Let's back up for 1 second. For the benefit of the audience who either doesn't have children in school or may not subscribe to our local newspaper, give us a kind of a snapshot of what a typical school week will look like with not only the early releases that had been done prior, but this that has now been done as of last night's meeting.
Well, this year's calendar, Cheryl, as I think you're well aware, allows for late starts on Mondays for our high school students and early releases on Fridays for our elementary and middle school students. Next year, all grade levels, K-12, actually PK through 12, will have, as it stands now, early releases on Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. The idea behind it was to allow for PK through 12 collaboration. The case was made that we need to have that happen to make the process better. I have no qualms with that. I'm a big fan of collaboration. I think it's something we need to do. The question becomes, how do we accomplish it? As Mr. Schneider aptly puts forward, the plan that was on the table last night accomplished everything that was set out in the original calendar, but did it outside the student day. We fulfilled minutes. We put minutes back into the calendar. We did what we needed to do to promote education in this district without any harm to anyone aside from a 5-minute early out for teachers. Now, if teachers are in favor of early out for students, why wouldn't they be in favor of early outs for themselves? Seems like a pretty rudimentary question to me. I'm interested to hear what they have to say on that one.
Ben, your wife is a school teacher in the Neenah School District. What do they have as far as a class schedule up there?
Well, Neenah, to my knowledge, is one of the longest school days in the state. And also the teachers in Neenah have a 37.5-hour contract work week. Mm-hmm. Oshkosh, we have 35. So there is collaboration, but collaboration not at the expense, to the extent in Oshkosh, of the instructional time. Mm-hmm. She's in a middle school, and you know we're talking about. So to draw the correlation, I'm somewhat familiar with her contract, her calendar, or her class day, aside from working longer during the course of the work week. But they have more flexibility because they are not minimizing the educational instruction or opportunities to the extent we are here.
And that's why so many people are going to the Neenah School District, as some of your own colleagues on the school board have noted at past meetings, I think. What does this do to you, for example, or to you, Dan? You're both parents. What does this do to your own household?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I fortunately have the flexibility to be home in the afternoons to oversee my son when he comes home from school. Not everybody enjoys that luxury. I feel I definitely have some empathy for those folks that are going to have to take vacation days, find some place for their kids to go after school, and God forbid, have kids at home by themselves. That's the real risk we run, Cheryl, is having 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds at home by themselves for 45 minutes.
Which is against the law.
Technically, yeah, but you know as well as I do, it's going to happen.
Yeah, it will.
Well, and for me, I do have the flexibility, but if I didn't have the flexibility, I have 2 children in the system, which makes me somewhat unique because along with Mr. Becker and myself and one other board member, we're the only 3 of the 7 board members that have kids in the system. But anyway, but it would actually cost me about $250 next year if I didn't have that flexibility just for my 2 children. It's basically $7.50 per early release times 17 times 2 children. There are many families that have 1 child or 4 children, and so it would be a big cost on top of the projected 8.6% tax increase. And again, collaboration is not the debate here; it's the manner in which it's being achieved, and that's why that resolution that failed last night to simply direct, let's go back to the table. It's just simply let's work together and listen to our constituency.
Okay. Now, the 5 board members who voted against the resolution, it doesn't seem like they're going to budge on that, at least from my watching it. And yet, Dan, you're going to bring this back again in a couple weeks, right? What purpose?
Well, my hope, Tony, is that we can provide at least another opportunity for the public to come forward and express their views. Maybe I'm a wide-eyed optimist, but let's give it one more shot. We tried it the friendly way. This is the only other option available to us, Tony. I'm hoping people come out. I'm hoping people express their viewpoints. I'm hoping people make contact with Karen Bowen, with Don Sween, with Tom McDermott, with Dennis Kavanaugh, with Amy Weinsheim. Plead your case, folks. If you've got something to say, bring it forward. Make contact with myself. Make contact with Mr. Schneider. You got to get your voice heard.
So the two of you clearly then don't accept what I guess Mr. Eichstedt, is that his name, the assessment director, has said. This is on the issue of the time. He has said it's not how much instructional time you have, it's what you do with the time that you have. So that you don't accept that. You think there's a correlation between just more time and better performance. He's saying it doesn't matter if you have less time, it's what you do in that time that you have. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Again, Tony, I think you're missing the... I'm sorry, I don't mean to be...
No, that's okay.
But since this is in Oshkosh, I guess we got to mix it up a little. But it's not the collaboration it's the issue. It's the manner in which it's being achieved. And for someone that doesn't have kids in the system, to tell...
I'm not asking about the collaboration. I'm saying if you've got children now that get less classroom time, forget about the collaboration. Eichstedt is saying it doesn't matter if they have less classroom time. What matters is what the children do in the time that they have, independently of whether the time is being missed because of collaboration or anything else. You two clearly don't believe that a child can learn better with less class time, right? You seem to think there's a relationship between the amount of time in class and how well they do.
I believe, Tony, that children can succeed in lesser amounts of time, but what's the harm in providing that extra time to them so they can achieve even greater amounts? I ask you.
Well, isn't your... I agree, and as a teacher, I agree with that. Often we have college professors that let students out early for whatever reason, and sometimes it is defensible, sometimes it's not, so I agree with that. But on the other hand, Dan, isn't the problem really with No Child Left Behind, that act? I mean, doesn't that act mandate this kind of teacher collaboration or professional development of teachers? Isn't that where the problem is?
No Child Left Behind does put some bars out there for our teachers to achieve. No argument for me. No Child Left Behind's got some favorable parts from my perspective.
Sure.
It's also got some unfavorable aspects to it. But to put the onus on our children to achieve some of those goals, I believe is the wrong approach to take.
Yeah, I don't think No Child Left Behind said Oshkosh Area School District have 17 early release times in beginning 05-06 and burden hundreds of families and disregard a 600-person petition. I think it doesn't mandate specifically collaboration. I don't know if it's in that document. It's more of accountability and raising standards. And if raising standards means allowing teachers to collaborate, that's great. But let's do it in a manner in which it doesn't disrupt our constituents, those that we serve. Because as you know, open enrollment, parents can go to another school district. We're in a competitive nature. We want to increase enrollment. We don't want to continue to burden families and result in potentially lower enrollment.
But Ben, I know your resolution didn't mandate your solution, right? The resolution was to open up the process again, correct? But the union leader in the paper seemed to make it sound like your idea was a non-starter. That's what it sounded like.
Unfortunately, they're about as open as a New England clam.
But
with some of their issues. And all I know is
I'm mad at the union too. I mean, for a lot of reasons. You know, in my particular race, I've been a public school teacher for 20 years. Yeah. They wouldn't even interview me.
Yeah, and
I'm not in the right team. But regardless of that, if you've got the union leader saying this is a non-starter, even if you weren't able to get the union back into negotiation, right?
Which we're always in negotiations.
Okay, but isn't it just time wasted? It sounds like they're not going to go for an idea.
If there's a will, there's a way. And I'm sorry for giving you cliches, but the fact is we're asking for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, creative way to solve such a large problem that people express. And what unfortunately is, you look at a lawyer, if you provide an offer, if a prosecutor provides an offer to a defense attorney, they have the right to take that to their client. I think they have a right to take this to their membership. And I have to think that 820 teachers are reasonable. And I think sometimes that the union leadership doesn't represent.
All right, well, let me put it this way.
Isn't being
let me
very
ask you
reasonable.
this, Dan. With the previous calendar, with the elementary, middle school students being dismissed early on 9 Fridays, that's a burden too, correct?
It is a burden.
Why wasn't there a level of protest for that?
Because I think parents can more easily adapt to Fridays, Tony, than they
Why
can
is that?
Wednesdays. Fridays are a nice day to get out early for kids. Moms and dads that can take the vacation or take the vacation days can take the long weekend. They can go to Door County. They can go to Grandma's house. Wednesdays are not a very convenient day for people to take off of work, Tony.
Or sometimes people just tend to duck out of work a little bit early on a Friday
Sure.
and not even take a vacation day, just leave an hour or
Yep.
so early. Ben, your wife, as I said before, works in the Neenah School District, and I know that they've got their own problems there with, still working under a contract from a few years back. But they do have a longer work week, and they still manage to get their collaboration time in and so forth. What is it about the Oshkosh Area School District and the union that represents the teachers here? Are they just better negotiators than some of these other school districts, or what is it that things like this seem to be such sticking points, such bones of contention?
I would summarize it by saying inflexibility in Oshkosh, with the Oshkosh union leadership. And actually, it's interesting. You look at the pay between the two districts; they're similar, but yet, Neenah, you work 2.5 hours more per week over the course of a year. That's roughly 90 hours times the average teacher earning about $40 on salary. That's enough. That's like another $3,600 that you make. Well, you get the same pay between Neenah and Oshkosh, but you work 90 hours less than your neighbors to the north. And so why is it that they're able to do it? I think that you've had school boards for many years in Oshkosh that have negotiated with kid gloves, and they're somewhat lapdogs of the teachers union.
But you're not suggesting that our teachers don't work hard. You're not saying that.
I didn't. Did I say that?
No, you're not saying that.
Well,
I don't think I've ever heard him say it, Tony. I've never said it either.
And I'm actually have a unique. Mr. Becker's wife's a teacher. That's pretty unique. That's a pretty unique perspective. I live daily with with what teachers go through, and I also have 2 children in this system. So you'd never hear me suggest that. It's a wonderful profession. It's a
Yeah.
So
should Neenah teachers be working less, or should Oshkosh teachers be working more?
I think we need to extend our contract work week. 35 hours. We're trying to pound 8 pounds of sand in a 4-pound bag, and it's hard to do, Tony. And our teachers are doing a great job, but we need to realize that we have higher standards, and we can't continue to try to have higher standards with less, time. Some things just take time, and to accomplish everything that we want to do in 35 contract hours is nearly impossible.
You did have one teacher, and I cannot remember her name. Not last night's meeting, but the previous meeting, a teacher came and spoke before the board about the benefits of the collaboration time. And again, I know you're not saying there's anything wrong with the collaboration time, but didn't you find that persuasive? That I think she was making an argument that this calendar is a good one with the early release on the Wednesdays, and that it will produce good things for the district. That if we can find a way to accommodate the parents, the district says it wants to, don't you think that this will ultimately produce something good for the district?
Well, I sure hope so.
I think I agree with Mr. Schneider. I sure hope it does, because I think we're stuck with it for the time being. I mean, only time will tell.
And just because one teacher said it's good doesn't mean it is good. I respectfully, all this acknowledge, collaboration's a good thing, but it's the manner in which it's being achieved, and so many people want you to get distracted from that topic. And again, by me talking about extended contract work week doesn't mean that one group works harder or less. The fact is, when you have 2.5 hours per week to accomplish things, you have much more flexibility, and I would challenge the board, and the labor groups to work together to achieve that flexibility.
Okay. Just one last thing, Cheryl.
Sure, go ahead.
Dan, you made the comment several times at the meeting last night that the district has egg on its face.
Absolutely.
How does the district have egg on its face over this?
We have received bad PR, Tony, up and down the eastern half of the state, from TV stations in Green Bay to radio stations here in Oshkosh, to radio stations in the greater Fox Valley, to the biggest radio station in this state, WTMJ in Milwaukee. Not to give them a plug, but they cover the entire geography of the state of Wisconsin.
And all this media coverage has been saying Oshkosh teachers are
that Oshkosh taxpayers are getting the short end of the stick.
because
To paraphrase.
Okay.
Well, you know, I guess let's talk about this collaboration thing. You know, whether it's a direct result of No Child Left Behind or just an idea that somebody somewhere along the way cooked up, what exactly are these teachers collaborating about and with whom? I mean, years ago, we didn't hear about all this collaboration. And I don't know that instructional ideals and basic philosophies have changed that terribly much. That, I mean, you still need to know core subject material. So who's doing the collaborating with whom and about what? Why does it require so much?
Well, in this ever-evolving educational society, Cheryl, we've got to make sure that there's a standard that's being met from one building to the next. All too often in the past, a student has, just as an example, has moved from Jefferson Elementary to Roosevelt Elementary or Lincoln Elementary, and was forced, just because of that move, to go through the same curriculum for a period of time. What part of collaboration is hoping to accomplish is standardization in terms of time of delivery, so that if a student does make a move from one building to another, that there's no lag time, that they can essentially start from where they left off in another building. It's also there to ensure that our teachers are consistent in delivery, not so much in terms of time, because that's already being covered, but in terms of content, in terms of technique. Because research tells us that the fewer disruptions we can put in front of the children, the better off they're going to be ultimately. And again, I have no qualms with collaboration. It's just simply a matter of how we deliver it.
And I think how you do the collaborating. You know. Go ahead, Tony.
Both of you guys seemed pretty upset with the other board members last night, and we have an election obviously coming up next year for school board. I mean, I think people should be running for school board.
I fully intend to, Tony, since my term's
You're gonna be
due to
running,
expire.
So you are running for re-election.
I am going to run for re-election.
All right. And I mean, I take it clearly both of you think that there are some people on the current board that should not be returned.
Affirmative.
Who's up for re-election next year?
Well, aside from Mr. Becker, Mr. Kavanaugh and Mrs. Weinsheim. And it's interesting you pointed out, because I believe one member of the community already announced her intention to run, I believe.
Who's that?
Was that correct?
That is correct. I had a conversation just earlier today with Michelle Monty, who expressed to me that she fully intends to seek election.
And
has she been involved in this calendar issue?
Yes, she's been
quite
very
outspoken
vocal,
on the
and
issue.
she has a parent of 4 children. She's a veteran. She's a teacher, and she's raising her children right now. She's actually, I think she's going to be a very strong candidate. And there's also another person that I know that has been discussing it. So I think we can get these things changed around, and you know, I'm hopeful. But in terms of, I don't know what the term you said, upset with our board members. I would say disappointed, because I truly believe the majority of people, majority of our constituents, those that are impacted by this, do not support.
Well,
this
Mr.
calendar.
Sween said he was offended
Yes.
by you bringing up this resolution. How did you feel about that?
Just to be clear, he's offended by me bringing back a request to renegotiate an item.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Someone's offended by a request to reconsider an item. And I guess that is just, that's pretty sensationalistic. And I think Mr. Sween, I think he should be making plans after his term's up. After his 3 years, I think he should find out. He'll be able to watch reruns of something on Wednesday night.
You got Tom McDermott and Dennis Kavanaugh, who were part of the bargaining team, right? I imagine, were negotiating the best they could for the school board, right? And with the administration. So I mean, aren't you upset with them? Are you saying that we didn't get good representation or the school board did not get good representation in the bargaining?
I don't know that I'm speaking only for myself, Tony. I'm not sure I'm saying that. What I'm saying is they negotiated with the information they had at the time.
Sure.
Okay. Now, since the information has come forward that one could argue the public as a whole is not pleased with this issue, as Mr. Schneider suggests, let's go back and try and fix what we've done. That's all I'm asking for, and I'm assuming that's all that Mr. Schneider's asking for, is to learn from this mistake and try and rectify it.
And again, I think the term's disappointed. And hey, you know, we're seven unique individuals. Can't we disagree? And can't we continue to disagree and try to work on a compromise? You know, this is America, and although people are offended that people are still disagreeing and they're trying to reach a compromise and be part of the solution versus be part of the problem, I think that's reasonable to continue to work on improving on something that the community's asked us to.
Ben, do you think that, you know, asking you to speculate a little bit here, do you think that Don Sween's being offended has anything to do with the fact that he is a retired teacher and may have some favorable leanings toward teachers as a whole? Or do you think that this is just, he just thinks that this is the best way to go?
Yeah, I think he is a lapdog of the teachers union, there's no doubt about it. And I think he is a puppet of special interest. Okay. And I think he is offended probably because his narrow constituency has probably rallied, maybe put a little smelling salt under his nose before he went in the boardroom for discussion. But again, I think if someone's offended by that, I think it's infantile. I think that comment was it's disappointing, and you know. But
you don't really mean that he's a lapdog of the teachers union. That's going a little too far.
Well, he's not. He's certainly not a guard dog.
I mean, you haven't.
He's not a guard dog of the taxpayers' trust or the taxpayers' dollars when he thinks raising money, increasing taxes, and telling taxpayers they got to bite the bullet. After a 9% tax increase, we got to bite the bullet.
But that was a majority of board members.
We bit the cannon last year. Gosh.
But that was a majority of board members that voted for that, right? Not just.
Sure.
Right. So then, are they all lapdogs of the teachers union?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important.
A couple poodles and.
I think it's important to draw the distinction, Tony, that prior to Don Sween's involvement in this process, the board was deadlocked on what to do with next year's tax increase. Don Sween, I think rightfully so, abstained from the initial vote on this issue. And then after some, I'm hoping anyway on his part, some deep soul searching and some research, came to the conclusion, and I think the wrong conclusion ultimately, that he's able to participate in this issue and swung the vote from a 3-3
Well, he had legal support for that, did he not?
Arguably. There's still a lot of gray area on that issue. I've heard both pros and cons. Can Don vote? Can Don not vote?
But he had an opinion from...
yeah, I think he
a very cloudy opinion.
Yeah, he consulted with Denny Crane, I think, from... what show is that from? No, anyway. But yeah, the question will be, can Mr. Sween vote for the levy to fund the budget? Because what $1.6 million of the budget is retiree health insurance, and that'll be an interesting position that will have to be defined if he can actually vote to fund the budget with the levy vote in October. We're voting on the budget in July, and will we be able to vote for the levy to fund the budget? And I actually don't think he'll be able to, but we'll see.
Well, I personally don't think that he should be able to, but that's just one person's opinion. What is being done? What is going to be done between now and the time when that vote is taken? Is the district intending to actually once and for all get an issue on this, get an opinion on this, and put this issue to rest, or is this just going to be something hanging over the district's head from now until the cows come home?
The gyrations the district is going to have to go through to allow Don Sween to vote on this issue are immense. We've talked about bifurcating the vote into those issues that Don can vote on and those issues that Don can't vote on. Well, that's fine as it relates to the budget, in my opinion. I mean, it's going to be a major pain in the keister, but you know, if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do. But when it comes to setting the levy, you can't bifurcate the levy vote, and that's just the way it is. I mean, we can't mainstream some dollars one way and mainstream some dollars the other way just because Don said these were okay and Don said these weren't. That becomes a hornet's nest.
You know, members of the state legislature vote on the Wisconsin retirement system and things like that, and they're in it. They're in that system. Members of the state legislature are getting ready to vote on a pay raise for themselves, which, if there ever was a group that didn't deserve a pay raise, that's it. I mean, don't you think, just to play devil's advocate, don't you think when people voted for Don Sween, they knew he was a retired teacher, and they knew that there was a possibility that there could be some votes where it would be cloudy and gray. So when people put a person like that in office, aren't they saying, look, we expect that he can vote? Right.
And actually, I think people, they will be stuck with voter's remorse for the next two and a quarter years, and you're absolutely right. But the fact is, if there's a state ethics board says one thing, you know, that's going to override that. So yes, you're right. He disclosed that, and he had a special interest.
But it sounds like you guys, if the state ethics board or the opinions say he can vote, you're still going to say, well, it's cloudy. Maybe he can.
Well, to be honest with you, Tony, it doesn't matter what Ben and I have to say on the issue. It's what the general public says in the city of Oshkosh, because there's a lot of avenues open if Joe Lunchbucket doesn't agree with Don Sween's vote.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of recourse out there for them.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Cheryl?
There was also a workshop held last night. Well, I guess let me just go back. Do either of you have any other thoughts on this scheduling early release issue?
I think we're stuck with it. My only hope is that another board member can find it deep within themselves to do the right thing.
Well, if you got
short of that,
you know, I tell you right now, if you have 600 people signing a petition, if even 1/3 of them come to the next board meeting, things will happen.
Well, and
politicians respond to pressure.
Yeah.
And at least 1 or 2 of those people will fold if that boardroom is packed up. I firmly believe that.
But you know, you talked about the 6 or 8 people that expressed concern about the calendar. The fact is, 600 petitions is like 6 or 10 people to come to the board. You know, you don't have to come to the board to get your message across. Some people are at home working with their kids on their homework, etc. And so, I still feel that even if 5 people showed up, that's a tremendous amount, because I have 600 copies of 600 signatures that carry a lot of weight with me.
Well, yeah, right. But all I'm saying is it's a lot more difficult for an elected body to ignore a packed room.
It absolutely is.
And if even 1/3 of these 600 feel as passionate as you two do, then I think they should be able to come to a meeting. Right?
I would hope so.
You know,
and that's all I'm after.
Yeah.
Is if 200 people, 300 people show up, I would enjoy nothing more than moving the board meeting from its current confines to a bigger room to accommodate them and hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Cheryl.
After the main board meeting last night, there was a workshop, and that's what actually went until close to 11:30. And one of the main parts of this workshop talked about some problems going on at Jefferson Elementary, problems with vandalism on the playground and things like that. For viewers who didn't stay up that late, what is going on at Jefferson?
Oh, I can't comment. I dozed off, I think. No, just kidding.
No, I saw you. You had your eyes open.
Did you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. Apparently there's some individuals, and I don't want to characterize it in any greater detail than that, because I don't want to cast aspersions on any particular group, but individuals that are being disruptive at Jefferson Elementary School, doing things ranging from breaking bottles on our playground to engaging in graffiti on some of our playground equipment, and just causing general mayhem. And to this point, we have been met with nothing but artificial roadblocks, again, in my opinion, from the city of Oshkosh in addressing that issue.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, I've heard nothing short of the school board needs to pass policy, the school board needs to do this, the school board needs to do that before the city will be able to do anything.
You're talking about the police department.
Well, yeah, exactly. And in my opinion, the activities that are going on at Jefferson Elementary School are nothing short of disorderly conduct. And I'm certainly not a lawyer, and I think Warren Kraft is obviously infinitely more qualified to make these determinations as am I. But when you're breaking glass on anybody's property, I think the property owner is certainly entitled to police protection. And the city is, in my fair man's estimation, not fill in the bill in this instance. I mean, if we got glass being broken on our playgrounds, which arguably are a hazard to elementary school students,
Absolutely.
I think the city is obviously not meeting its burden.
It's just a tough situation. It's bad behavior is the problem. How do you curtail bad behavior? You try to, communicate with the parents of those children, and you got to find out who they are. But that workshop was encouraging because it really highlights the need for collaboration between the city, the school board, the county, and actually I think they're making really good positive strides. There are some issues with signage that we have to some hurdles that we have to jump through, but we just got to continue to work to try to curtail this behavior, because obviously when you're dealing with a safety concern, vandalism and bullying, etc., that's a major concern, as you said.
Yeah,
there really isn't collaboration, is there? Effective collaboration, not just on this issue, but on many. Like watching the meeting last night, I think it was Mrs. Bowen who just made a passing comment that someone had mentioned to her that we might have to expand in the Traeger district because of some development happening in that area. I mean, shouldn't that be part of a long-range plan?
I would agree.
Right, where it doesn't just all of a sudden come up, oh, by the way, we may have to expand the Traeger district.
Well,
and it in fact is, Tony. I mean, we are going through a lot of things with demographers, and we are actually in communication with the city on a regular basis in terms of what their plans are.
So we are doing that.
Oh yeah, absolutely we are. I mean, the district has spent a lot of time and a lot of money ultimately to gather data to, do what it can to make sure that there's no surprises.
And just to clarify, because I thought that comment really wasn't helpful to how difficult it is to make permanent decisions on variable information. Variable information is increase and decrease in enrollment projections. 5 years ago, enrollment was projected to decline by over 1,000 kids by today. I think we declined by a little over half of that. So if we'd have made some major decisions 5 years ago, we'd have looked perhaps like fools. In fact, the school district wanted us to have a $12.6 million referendum to build a new school and 4 additions on its different schools in November of 2001, and we've declined enrollment since we've had declined enrollment. So it is part of a comprehensive long-range plan. It moves slower than people would have liked, but I think it remains slow because we want to be cautious, and we realize that enrollment projections are just that. They're projections, and as farther you get out, the more unreliable that data becomes.
Going back to the Jefferson School situation, one of the gentlemen, and I don't recall offhand who he was, but he talked about a camera that has been in place to videotape some of the activity on at least a portion of the playground area. He said that has been somewhat effective, but it can only capture a part of it. I also heard comments from someone about people somehow getting up on the roof. Now, I don't know, is it possible to somehow put barbed wire around the roof or something so that that is discouraging people from going up there? As far as cameras, I had a thought, and I don't know if it's possible or not, but we've got a lot of wonderful people in this community, some who I'm sure have ties with the security industry. Would it not be possible to perhaps talk to them and see if someone is willing to, step up to the plate and maybe donate some equipment, even if just for a short period of time? I mean, it would be a tax write-off for them if they were going to donate it long-term or permanently, and it would help the district, i.e. the taxpayers, save some money. Is anything like that being considered? Was that part of the workshop? Because I too had to step away from part of it. I didn't doze off, but
well, I think that's all possible, with the exception of the barbed wire, to have the institutionalized look. I think we already have enough prisons in this city, but I think it's difficult to say what the solution is until we really have we fully studied and find out what's going to be effective. But I think it's really to deter the bad behavior. Obviously, children know that they can't break glass. They know that they can't go climbing up on roofs. And I would leave that in the experts of our police chief and our director of buildings and grounds and the experts on the committee to come up with recommendations that are going to deter behavior and prevent it and keep a safe environment for our students.
Someone did say that there's been good communication and work with the police department. What exactly is the police department saying? I mean, other than, I mean, you sort of talked about that a little
absolutely.
bit, but I'm not sure I really understand. What
From what I've heard, the city as a whole, ultimately the police department, is asking us to pass a lot of policies, namely outlawing glass on our playgrounds. And why, Cheryl, should we go through all those hoops? Because, I mean, ultimately there's ordinances on the books that prohibit
Of course.
all this kind of behavior.
That's
Why?
unnecessary layers of legislation.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, because if we are forced to do that, it's going to take us, because as you are well aware, the wheels of government grind slow. And it'll be at least a month or 6 weeks before we can enact all these types of policies. Whereas, you know, there's glass being broken from the reports I've received almost on a nightly basis.
You know, and what I'd like to see is, and I know our police department's already spread thin, but it just perhaps increased coverage to that
Exactly.
area during the peak times of these incidents occurring. And I think we should try different measures and monitor to see if we're successful. But it's kind of like if you have a lot of speed in an area, put up you have a cop radar and perhaps curtail the behavior. And this is something new we're dealing with. And I think to say this is how we should handle it when we really haven't had a lot of experience. Thankfully, this is a nice, safe community, and we're seeing some change on some of these things. And
It's terrible. What's going on with the renaming of the West Gym?
Well, that issue is really one that I put forward, Tony.
Right.
I received some requests from a number of individuals, primarily, as you would well imagine, I'm sure, from the West High School community, and asked that the board take a look at it. And that's really what policy dictates, is that we receive a written request from the general public to look at these types of issues, and that issue was brought forward. At this point, I'm almost sorry to say, Tony, that not a lot has been done on that issue.
Well, what should be happening?
Well, from my perspective, what should be happening is, at the very least at this point, a focus group should have been formed. We should have garnered public input on the issue, at the very least. I mean, at the outset, my hope was to at least have a lot of these issues done before the conclusion
Why
of
the
the
foot
school.
dragging?
well,
I don't know, quite honestly.
I think you know, Mr. Becker's in charge of that, and you know, he's our contact because the request was made to him. You know, and I think a good thing that's occurring is we're taking this slow from the standpoint of we're trying to be sensitive to the request, and much like the vandalism that is occurring, thankfully we don't get a lot of requests like this because this is a result of a tragedy on a very dedicated, outstanding staff member. And so we're moving slow, and unfortunately it seems like we're moving too slow, and I believe in the next week or two Mr. Becker will call a meeting, but we're new at this. I know I'm on the committee with Mr. Becker, and we're trying to just be sensitive and get as much input as possible, but yeah, we have to.
But you want it to move faster. You think it should have moved faster?
I definitely think it should have moved faster, and as I said, Tony, I would have really liked to have this all done by the end of the school year.
Is it the responsibility of the board to form a focus group, or does Mr. Heilman do that? How does the focus group get formed?
The board charged the Facilities and Finance Committee with moving forward with this issue.
Who chairs that committee?
Well, Mr. Schneider does ultimately,
Okay.
but he has seen fit to put me in charge of it, and I gladly took on that responsibility, and I've done my my best to move forward with it, and I've met, quite frankly, Tony, with some opposition from administration on this issue.
Because they're uncomfortable with changing the name of the gym?
It would seem so.
Okay.
Why?
If I could figure that out, Cheryl, that would be the issue.
Yeah. Ultimately, would the board have to vote on a name change?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds to me like there are probably people on the board who don't want to have to vote on this.
That would also be my estimation.
And can I just clarify one thing? I am the chairman of the Facility and Finance because of longevity, and I thought since it was a request from Mr. Becker, but again, I asked Mr. Becker I thought he should be in charge of that, and in terms of forming the committee, it just, unfortunately, when you deal with a lot of different layers, you form a committee, and next thing you know, it just takes it just stalls. And it's a dual concern. You don't have too small of a committee, you don't have too large of a committee, and you want to be sensitive and finding the balance, moving fast, not speeding, but not going too slow. And I think that's where we're at. And you know, I'm learning on this, and if it's too slow, I apologize for people that feel it's being too slow. But you want to be sensitive to the request, and hopefully in the next week or two we can get this rolling. And
that is my intention, absolutely. Okay. And you know, if we don't get it done by the end of the school year, And at this point, it doesn't look like we're going to. We just need to keep a steady course.
Sure.
You know, as we tape this, school will be out in probably about another 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks. Last year, you were here, Ben, about this time, I think, and we were talking about some of the summer school programs that kind of raised the hair on your back a little bit, things like puppetry courses. Are those things still being taught in our summer school program?
Yes, actually, I don't think we've seen the course list specifically because it's based on, it's enrollment driven. But last night, the board, by a 5-2 vote, approved the summer school curriculum in a generic sense and the pay with those summer school classes. And in some cases, we're paying staff $46 per hour to teach those classes, and in a low end, maybe $22, $23 an hour. But yeah, those are the enrichment courses. The reason why I'm somewhat frustrated with the summer school program is because we have a rec department, which we can, for a fee, we can have those enrichment classes, but I'm all in favor, 100% in favor of those catch-up courses for those that need additional need during the summer for the math, the reading, the core areas. And I'm in favor of the enrichment, but I think that the enrichment should be more borne by the cost of the user, and I think it's a pretty expensive proposition, and that's perhaps why why you described it that way.
So at a minimum, someone is earning $22 or $23, and at a maximum, $46 an hour to teach kids puppetry.
Well, amongst many other things, but yes.
I understand. Well, how long is a puppetry course, for example?
I don't know how long it takes to put a sock on,
Puppetry is pretty complicated, folks.
Well, I know, and we are producing some puppet masters to the Juilliard School of Puppetry in Manhattan. So it's not all in vain, but no, it's, yeah.
Well, okay, but we're making light of this, but seriously, these are all of our tax dollars, and everyone out there, your tax dollars too. You know, why can't this be run through the rec department? I mean, are you guys putting something like that forward for future years? This just seems like a ridiculous waste of money.
And I tried to accomplish that a little bit last night, Cheryl, with some of the questions that I did ask, and I don't know if you know, a lot of your viewers are the same viewers that tune in on Wednesday nights. But the point I made last night is, why are we actually paying teachers $46 an hour to teach summer school? Because inevitably there's other qualified individuals that are on our current staff that can teach some of these classes at closer to the $22 or $23 an hour pay scale. And quite honestly, the answer I got was, well, that's just the way it is. And I'm certainly not a favor of status quo on this issue, Cheryl. It really becomes an issue, and I know I got chastised last night at the board meeting for saying it, but we really do need to bargain shop when it comes to summer school. Because right now, summer school is a first come, first serve from a teaching perspective. And you know, it's the more seasoned and rightfully so, better paid teachers that are coming forward, and I certainly don't begrudge teachers for making, you know, what it is they make after years and years of experience. But do we really need to have our most seasoned teachers teaching summer school? Okay. And I would argue no.
Also, at last night's meeting, there was some talk about high-profile resignations at Oshkosh North, and some of you gave speeches about how Oshkosh North is a great school and all that. Can you give our viewers any sense of what's going on? I mean, are people resigning because they're troubled with work conditions, or what's going on?
Well, there seems to be a mass exodus from North.
A mass exodus?
Well,
you mean they're leaving in droves?
Are we talking about teachers, administrators?
We are talking about coaching staff.
Coaching staff, okay.
And
I was confused as to what we were talking about.
Yeah. We have had over the last few years, Tony, a number of coaches leave Oshkosh North.
Okay.
And primarily, and I don't know if it's an effort by the Kimberly School District, but that seems to be where they're going.
Well, in a put in perspective, we have over 800 over 800 teachers in our district, and I think at North in particular, there's a staff of, I want to say, well, it's over 100, but I'm not exactly sure. I believe it's over 100, but we've had approximately, what, four staff members leave for greener pastures, and that's...
This year alone. It's happened in years past as
we had
well.
Mr. Jorgensen as assistant, and we've had several, but regardless, we can't keep up with the Joneses. If someone is going to lure an individual away, that's part of life.
Okay.
Free agents get lured away all the time, and they are free to find, and I wish them luck, but I'm confident when you have 300 applicants or 150 applicants for a job, we will find a qualified replacement.
Cheryl, I want to make sure I get a chance to say one thing before we
go right
close
ahead.
here. I got to commend Mr. Becker. I don't agree with you on everything. I don't agree with anybody on everything. But Mr. Becker, since he's been on the board, has regularly had town hall type of meetings at the firehouse, correct?
Correct.
And when is your next one coming up?
The 21st from 4 to 6.
21st of May from 4 to 6. And I just think that's commendable whether one person shows up or 100. That is showing real dedication to the citizens of the community, and I really appreciate you for doing that.
Thank you, Tony.
How many typically show up?
I've sat there by myself on a few occasions, Cheryl, but I have had as many as 16 or 17 people show up.
And just for viewers who may not know, it's the firehouse located where?
This time around, it will be the firehouse located at the corner of Bone and Murdoch.
Okay. From 4 to 6 on May 21st.
Correct.
See, Schneider's afraid if he did that, they'd come with tomatoes and...
I'd have to be like Roadhouse. I'd have to be like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse and have that spare car, you know?
No, your fans would come. You could all sit there and like be mad and angry and yell and scream. It'd be fun.
I don't think so, Tony.
Just kidding.
We're down to about our last 60 seconds or so. Closing thoughts from either or both of you.
Go ahead.
I insist.
All right.
You got a nicer tie.
Thanks. I think this board is going to be facing some rather difficult changes over the next few years, more or less related to budget. And with budget comes some pains. And I think this board really needs to do, and the boards in the future needs to do what they can to maintain the tax levy at its current rate. And I know that's going to be a challenge, but there are a lot of options out there that boards and this board and boards in the future can do to keep the tax levy down without providing any pain to anybody short of unreasonable tax increases. Now, a lot of issues come forward to the board. We can do a lot to keep the tax levy down. I brought a lot of those forward. A lot of them have met with a lot of resistance from the teachers union. But really, we are here for the students.
Okay. All right. With that, we only have time to say thank you to both of you. It's always a pleasure. Ben, Dan, I hope you'll come back.
I certainly
This was
will.
fun. And be sure and wear colorful ties. I love color. Tony, thanks to you also. And most of all, thanks to you folks for letting us into your home as you do each and every week. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
Thank you.